Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and if you're an unusual part of the world, let me know about it because I love hearing from you and knowing all about you. And it's just so wonderful to share these fabulous stories with you, and this is another very exciting one tonight, so I hope you're going to enjoy it. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, the rain pelted down, making a gentle rhythmic pitter-patter sound on the roof. For a brief moment, I might have believed I was back in Ireland, as growing up in the Emerald Isle, rainy weather came with the DNA of being Irish, and seeing it rain like this was oddly comforting. It made me nostalgically think of home. The rain at this quintessential moment, however, was exceedingly inconvenient. I knew I needed to brave the elements, to go out into the rain to the 7-Eleven, to pick up some milk for my English breakfast tea. The ominous sky was dotted with grey clouds, their dark, depressing signatures firmly announcing that the rain was probably going to get significantly worse. But when you're busting for a cup of English breakfast tea, it's amazing what obstacles you're willing to overcome in order to get it. What was I like? I had barely been in America for even a month, and I was becoming pathetically homesick. I will admit not knowing anyone in this part of the world and bundling along to my own little merry tune had made me feel rather lonely. By all accounts, living in Ireland, I had never experienced what loneliness was until now. It was strange that I could be among so many people in a thriving metropolis with a high populace and feel like one insignificant bee among a huge hive. It would seem the only person who'd popped over to welcome me to my apartment was my immediate next-door neighbour, Mrs. Trinny Morley, who only stayed at her apartment a few weeks in a year when she was visiting New York, to visit her friends and to do some shopping, so it wasn't as if the apartment next door was her permanent residence, as most of the time her apartment was unoccupied and probably empty. I understood Trinny Morley's real home was back in Florida. She had been the only friendly face that had greeted me on my arrival here, apart from the postman, of course. I had moved into my late grandmother's apartment for a while I decided what it was I wanted to do with the place, for she had left it to me generously in her will. Mrs. Morley was telling me she loved my soft Irish accent and was excited to finally meet me, as my late grandmother, Pippa Waitman, had talked about me a lot over the years. Trinny and my late grandmother had been close friends, so it was nice to finally meet someone who had fond memories of my grandmother. Mrs. Morley claimed when my grandmother had been alive, she'd often talked about how she regretted not knowing her Irish granddaughter, for she would have liked to have known me better. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, some things are probably just not meant to be. Mrs. Morley was a striking, well-groomed elderly woman, with white, short, elegantly layered hair, with a chiselled face and high cheekbones, along with two defined, perfectly arched eyebrows, and kind blue eyes. I invited her into the apartment for tea, and she told me that some of my facial features did rather remind her of my late grandmother, which she said was a big compliment, because even in her advancing years, I believe my grandmother, from what my father had even told me, was a very handsome, striking woman. "I'm so delighted to finally meet you," she said, fiddling with her necklace of pearls around her neck. "Sorry, what did you say your name was, dear? My memory these days, it's just terrible. But that's what you have to put up with when you get to my age." "I'm Alice Waitman," I told her. "Alice," she said approvingly. "I love the name Alice. What a lovely name. And, of course, your surname would be Waitman, wouldn't it, like Pippa's was?" "Oh, sorry, do forgive me, dear. What am I like? I haven't even introduced myself to you yet. I'm Trinny Morley. I've lived next door to your grandmother for many, many years. I used to live there full time with my husband Fletcher, until finally we moved to Florida, because that's where we retired. Many people retire to Florida, you see. The weather is great over there, and it's wonderful to live on the coast. we decided not to sell our apartment here in New York, where, dare I say, we lived happily for many long years. I guess I got very attached to the place. These apartments, with their prepossessing Victorian architecture, are very special in my book. I mean, they don't make apartments like this anymore. Modern architecture these days is frightful as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't agree with you more, Mrs. Morley, I admitted. You can't go wrong with classic architecture. It's timeless, isn't it? I can understand why you didn't want to part with your apartment. When I saw Granny Pippa's apartment for the first time, I didn't expect it to be as glamorous as this. Thank you, dear, for saying such a lovely thing, said Mrs. Morley. Yes, you're right. I'm very attached to my apartment. And besides anything else, I thoroughly enjoy coming back to New York a few times a year, to catch up with some of my old friends that live here, and to visit some of my favourite haunts. When I say we decided not to sell the apartment, she said, her voice suddenly dropping to a whisper, the truth is I exaggerated a wee little bit. You see, my husband Fletcher has no interest in returning to New York. Well, not really. He wanted me to agree for us to sell our apartment here and be done with the whole thing. But I just couldn't let it go. I can't help myself. I guess the Big Apple will always be in my bones. Luckily, I managed to persuade Fletcher to let us keep the place. As besides anything else, my grandson Curtis uses it regularly when he comes up to New York from time to time. My husband Fletcher teases me relentlessly about my obsession with New York. So often when I come up here, it's usually on my own, unless I manage to persuade Fletcher to come along for the ride. But he does so very begrudgingly, I have to say. I don't think he's terribly fond of New York anymore, although he's never admitted it to me when we lived here. But I just think he loves Florida. Well, at least your husband lets you keep the apartment here, I said. I mean, if you've lived in New York all your life, it makes perfect sense you'd be attached to the place. I'm very attached to my life in Galway, so coming to America for a year, well, it's not an easy endeavour. I've been here already a month, and I feel desperately homesick. You poor thing, said Mrs. Morley, her face expressing sympathy as the furrows between her brows deepened. I'm sure it doesn't help that you don't know many people in New York. You can be lonely in a big city like this and feel quite isolated, you know, especially when you don't know people. Believe me, I'm the first person to know that. Well, it has been rather lonely, so I'm glad I finally met you, I admitted. Tell me, Alice, said Mrs. Morley, eyeing me with a curious look in her eyes, are you going to live in this apartment of your grandmother's full time and make New York your new permanent residence? If it's any consolation, I'm sure in time you'll make lots of friends. I know that your grandmother hoped that by leaving her apartment to you, along with a bit of money, that you might broaden your horizons and live in America for a while. We do have a lot of Irish immigrants living here in America, you know. Many have Irish roots that run deep, that they've never forgotten about. Very proud they are to be Irish. You should see how St. Patrick's Day is celebrated over here. It's quite marvellous, it really is. There are parades, festivals and parties in New York, other places as well, all over America actually. Everyone of Irish descent wears green, along with some of the most crazy, preposterous hats you've ever seen. They wave Irish flags, walk down the streets, sometimes dance, special Irish dances. It's a wonderful celebration for so many, even those of us who do not have any Irish ancestry. To tell you the truth, Mrs. Morley, I'm not sure I'm planning to live here in New York for the foreseeable future. I'm actually planning to sell this apartment that my grandmother left me, in her will so generously. I'm not sure why she'd hope I'd live here, given I've spent all my life in Ireland. I've taken a year off from my job, though, to see where the tide takes me, you could say. I work in recruitment in Galway, but they've been kind enough to give me unpaid leave for a year. How perfectly lovely, dear! An entire year off. I do wish I had such an opportunity at your age. Your workplace must be very considerate and understanding to give you the time off. I'm not sure they'd be quite so accommodating here in New York. Well, I'm glad my boss is leaving the job open for me. It's very kind of him, I admitted. They are hiring someone to fill my place on a temporary basis, of course. I guess we just look out for each other. My friends in Ireland are like extended family to me, you see. I thought while I was here in New York I could travel around North America for a while. I do rather fancy going to Alaska and to the Yellowstone National Park. Those places are definitely top on my itinerary. My father talked about them a lot in Ireland, so he's whetted my appetite to go and visit them. I especially love the sound of Alaska. I've seen magnificent pictures of the wilderness there. It is beautiful.
Good for you, said Mrs. Morley, looking at me approvingly. I do like young people such as yourself who have a bit of spunk and want to take the bull by the horns and grab life with both hands, so to speak. I think travelling at your young age is the best time to take on an adventure before you finally settle down.
I suppose it makes sense, I agreed.
Of course it makes sense, dear. My grandson Curtis, I have to tell you, went to Alaska once to stay in a cabin with a couple of friends during the winter months. I think he was 18 years old at the time. He had quite the adventure, let me tell you, although it was very cold. I'm sure he'd love to see Alaska in summertime. I believe summers there are out of this world. I must say, dear, young people like yourself are a great inspiration. How old are you, if you don't mind my asking? Or am I overstepping the mark here by rudely asking your age? You never know what the right etiquette is these days with the younger generation, I find.
How old do you think I am? I asked teasingly. I won't be offended if you get my age wrong, as long as you don't think I'm a teeny bopper.
Ah, you're putting me on the spot, are you? Chuckled Mrs. Morley. I don't really like that, I have to say, but at a guess I would say you're probably 22.
Wrong! You got it totally wrong. I'm 28. But I'm not offended that you guessed I'm younger. Everybody wants to look younger than their natural age.
Well, I suspect it's the weather in Ireland, isn't it, that keeps your beautiful porcelain complexion looking so dewy and youthful, said Mrs. Morley approvingly. And, of course, that Titian colour hair of yours is magnificent. Is it true that when you have some fire in your hair, it can match your temperament? That's what I'm told, anyway.
That's an excellent question. The truth is, I'm pretty easygoing, Mrs. Morley. But if you poke the dog too many times, I might just bite. But it takes a lot to rile me up. But if I'm angry, well, I can light up like a firework on the 4th of July. But it's rare for that to happen, because it takes a lot to make me snap.
I guess I'm rather like that myself, said Mrs. Morley, even though I've never been lucky enough to have fire in my hair. I did dye my hair red once, though, and I've never had so much male attention before. I think I was 35 years old at the time. This talk about gentlemen preferring blondes is utter nonsense. I've been blonde all my life, so I know the difference. When my hair was red, I was like a spitfire. I was fighting men off like moths around a lamp, let me tell you.
I've never been blonde, so I wouldn't know about that. But I'm not sure if you have red in your hair that it necessarily makes you feisty. Generally, I'd say I'm pretty laid back, unless you push me to be otherwise.
Mrs. Morley chuckled. Like you, my dear, I'm pretty easygoing by nature. But if the truth be told, no one can press my buttons quite like my husband Fletcher. Honestly, that husband of mine is utterly incorrigible. He can be the absolute end, you know. I think he fancies himself as a perennial comedian. But most of his jokes are pretty klutzy as far as I'm concerned, and usually almost always involve giving me a huge scare of some kind. And I don't appreciate those kind of jokes. I think he gets off on my horrified reactions, you know. He finds them hilariously funny for some reason.
What has he done to press your buttons? I asked curiously, my face lighting up in a smile as I tried to imagine Mrs. Morley being entangled in one of her husband's crass jokes.
You really want me to tell you? She asked.
But of course I do. You can't just tell me your husband pulls stunts on you and not tell me what they are. I don't want to be left in suspense, do I?
Well, if you must know. Fletcher, with the help of my grandson Curtis, managed to put a crocodile in my bathroom in Florida once. It gave me one hell of a scare, let me tell you. But what did they do? They cracked up with laughter when I screamed out in terror, running out of the house like a bat out of hell. Curtis, my grandson, had the audacity to put my terrified reaction online for the entire world to see. There were thousands of approving likes saying that my reactions were classic, and that if they had a grandmother such as myself, they would be unable to help themselves from pranking me all the time. It would sadly seem that my mortified reactions of seeing a crocodile launching itself towards me in my bathroom was extremely entertaining for so many. One man went so far as to say he wet himself when watching the footage, he was laughing so much. He had no control over his bladder. I'm glad to say it was a well-fed crocodile that was strategically placed in my bathroom by my conniving husband and grandson. The crocodile, I'm glad to tell you, had no appetite at all. He wasn't interested in eating me, but I didn't know that at the time, and even if I did, it wouldn't have helped very much, because when I saw that thing in the bathroom, I was certain I was going to be its dinner. Let me tell you, dear, the crocodile looked as if it had eaten 6 people. Its belly was so distended. This thing was huge. I gather the crocodile's name was Ernest. He was owned by a friend of my grandson's, and rescued as a baby crocodile. According to my grandson's friend, he is a likeable character. Have you ever heard of a crocodile called Ernest being described as a likeable character? I've heard everything now, let me tell you.
No, I can't say I have, I said with a light chuckle. If I walked in on a crocodile in my bathroom, well, I can't imagine how I would react. But it wouldn't be funny, I can assure you of that.
Of course you can't imagine something like that, because you're not married to a man like my husband, nor do you know anyone quite like my grandson Curtis. I've never had such a dreadful scare in my entire life, and I thought it was a desperately cruel joke for them to play on me. My husband and my grandson are like 2 peas in a pod, despite the generation gap between the two of them. My husband has always been a prankster, and even in his 80s he still hasn't grown up yet. He's playing tricks on me and has done so throughout our marriage, and still does not appear to have stopped. He says pranking me is like an itch he can't stop scratching. My grandson Curtis is much the same. It was in fact Curtis's idea to pull the crocodile stunt on me in the first place and film it all. I was 79 years old at the time, but never once did those two stop to consider that I might just have a heart attack on the spot encountering such a deadly foe in my bathroom. When you're elderly like me, Alice, and you have a shock, it can potentially kill you. But when I told Curtis this, he slapped me on the back affectionately and said to me, "Granny, you're not an old woman yet. Age is a number, and you've got the constitution of a rhino." I didn't know how to react to that, let me tell you.
Your grandson told you that? I said, looking appalled. He told you had the constitution of a rhino, so you could cope with having a hefty-looking, well-fed crocodile waiting for you in the bathroom. Let me tell you, Mrs. Morley, if someone pulled a stunt on me like that, I'd completely lose it. That's when the fire in my hair would show itself. I'm terrified of crocodiles, and the only ones I've ever seen are at the zoo. But to get up close and personal to one, no thanks. I remember seeing a documentary of the Serengeti once, and how these wildebeest and zebras in Tanzania and Kenya have to cross the Zambezi River to get to the other side, so that they can reach greener pastures. They jump over these high riverbanks into the water below. It's quite a nasty stumble, let me tell you. Their hooves slide down the dirt-ridden banks until they jump into the water, making a dash to get to the other side as fast as they can. Some of them aren't so lucky when they try to make that vital crossing, because there are crocodiles waiting for them in the water that drag them down. They're formidable creatures, let me tell you, Mrs. Morley. You, dear, are a girl after my own heart. I wish you could tell that to Curtis, said Mrs. Morley approvingly. I know your grandmother. If she were alive, she would have really loved you, dear. I can see you and I have a great deal in common.
I'll have you know I also love wildlife documentaries. I've always been a huge fan of Richard Attenborough's. I always loved watching his films about the Serengeti and other parts of the world. I wish I'd gone to Africa when I was younger, I really do. But it was not to be, and is something I deeply regret. Never mind, maybe in another lifetime, perhaps. If you, my dear, want some advice and want to travel around North America, be warned that you may encounter a lot of indigenous wildlife and acres of wilderness that is not easy to navigate, let me tell you. I don't recommend you going to the Yellowstone National Park or to Alaska on your own.
You don't think I should travel on my own? I asked. Why not? Don't lots of young people travel solo? I thought that was the done thing these days. I was actually intending to travel alone.
Well, I don't know how to say this to you, dear, but maybe all this talk about crocodiles is making me err on the side of caution. I personally do not believe it's safe travelling on your own. I really don't. I know I wouldn't do it myself, that's for sure. I mean, if two people are together while you're travelling and one of you has an accident, the other can easily call for help. Being on your own makes you infinitely more vulnerable, don't you think? Yes, I know we have cell phones and things like that, but even they go on the blink. But having another person there makes things so much easier. What if a weirdo crosses your path and sees a young pretty lady such as yourself on her own? I can't imagine what would happen then. And then there's wild animals. The list goes on.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but you do make a good point, Mrs. Morley. It must be easy to get desperately lost in such a sprawling country such as this. That would be a worry for me. Being on my own, I mean, in the American wilderness. It might be a bit overwhelming. Ireland's such a small country compared to this. I'm struggling to adjust to the sheer size of everything here.
Well, you're right about that, Alice, said Mrs. Morley reflectively. America is a very large country. Sometimes even I forget that. I can see you're a sensible young lady, with a wise head on your shoulders. But you're right. It's very easy to get lost in the wilderness. Certainly when it comes to the Alaskan wilderness and some of our national parks. Let's just say many people go missing every year, never to be found again. No one knows what happens to these poor individuals. Some just disappear without a single trace, and there are many rumours as to what happened to these people. Some people believe they became a victim of a wild animal, a bear attack perhaps, aliens, portals, cryptid creatures, and the list goes on and on. Believe me, the theories really do abound.
I didn't know about any of this, Mrs. Morley. You're beginning to make me feel unduly nervous about travelling to these places on my own. You think I should be worried about this?
I just think, dear, that everyone travelling to the wilderness needs to err on the side of caution. I don't think I can stress that enough. The missing people stories I'm telling you about are something that is often brushed under the carpet. Ostensibly, if it was a well-known fact that people went missing every year from national parks in America, it might have an incredibly negative effect on the tourism industry, which makes billions of dollars in revenue every year. And knowing about this would likely make many tourists such as yourself inclined to think twice about visiting our national parks, with very good reason, of course. I think, however, if you are in good company, you'll probably not have very much to worry about. My motto in life is to live it to the fullest, but always to exercise due caution. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't take too many chances. There's so much adversity that can strike you down. Rugged terrain that is treacherously dangerous, and the list goes on. I always say go into the wilderness prepared, so that if you do lose your way, you can survive a few days before you're found. So you do need to take extra provisions with you. That's my personal advice, anyway.
I considered Mrs. Morley's words. I'd never heard about people going missing before in national parks in North America. But the truth is, when you hear of such things, you never really believe it's going to happen to you. It's like anything in this life. You try desperately not to apply it to yourself, because certainly if you did, you might never have the courage to leave your front door in a morning. just in case a meteorite might strike you down. Mrs. Morley studied me curiously.
So tell me, dear, what do you think of America so far? I'm extremely interested to learn your first impressions from an outsider's perspective.
Well, as you know, I think it's dauntingly huge, I admitted. I feel like a tiny, inconspicuous and fragile fish in an overwhelmingly large pond, and it is a wee bit intimidating. Certainly all this talk of people going missing in national parks does make me feel dizzyingly apprehensive. I'm not a scaredy cat by any manner of means, but I guess it's never crossed my mind that such horrible untoward things happen to people, like going missing, for example. In such cases, it's the loved ones I feel sorry for. They have no closure in their lives, do they? And that's got to be awfully hard. They must be left wondering what on earth happened to the people they loved.
You're right about that, dear. I think the not knowing what happened to a loved one has got to be tough,
Mrs. Morley agreed.
I mean, where is the closure in that? In my opinion, knowing why someone met their end gives us a sense of peace. But always wondering what happened to a loved one, with no answers ever forthcoming, is not kind. I had a kitten once that went missing, you know. I was living in my apartment at the time here in New York, and I had no idea where it went. But its enigmatic disappearance ate away at me for many years, and I was always left wondering what on earth happened to it. I never left any windows open. I never let the door open so it could escape. But it mysteriously just vanished. Now, had it been a human family member of mine, I don't know how I would have coped. I'm so sorry, dear, to speak about such unpleasant things to you. I didn't mean to frighten you about all this. That's the last thing on my mind.
Well, I'm glad you told me all this, Miss Morley. I really am. I don't want to be ignorantly naive when I take one of those trips. I'm glad you haven't sugar-coated everything for me.
It's just, dear, I want you to go on your intrepid adventures fully prepared to face any kind of adversity with your eyes wide open. Let me tell you, if you think New York is huge, you ain't seen anything yet. When you get out there on the open road, you'll see what big really means. New York is small by comparison, let me assure you. I think the Yellowstone National Park and the wilderness in Alaska will give you a better concept of the meaning of the word large. In Alaska, I'm told by my grandson Curtis that everything is bigger there, even the wild animals. I wouldn't know because I've never been to Alaska before. But I do know it is without doubt one of the most magnificent parts of North America. It's the Alaskan Triangle that is the problematic area of Alaska, I'm told. That's where people go missing every year. But what can I say about that? Some of life's mysteries can never be explained.
You're right on the money about what you've just said, I agreed. New York is a big city, but the American wilderness is on another scale. I can quite understand why people might go missing in such vast places, especially when it's so easy to get lost.
Well, let's change the subject, shall we, dear?
Said Mrs. Morley, clasping her stomach tightly, as if she suddenly felt quite ill, thinking about all these missing people. Or crocodiles in the Zambezi, I suspect. Or maybe just being reminded about the crocodile that she faced in the bathroom in Florida was giving her the heebie-jeebies. But I could see her face had gone completely white. Then she spoke.
I can see, dear, you look a little crestfallen, if you don't mind my saying so. If my words of warning have put a damper on your proposed trip, I do apologize. You're at such a lovely young age. The world is your oyster, my dear. And you don't want to think about adversity. I know that too well. But focus on the future. To build lovely memories for yourself. That's what's important. So when you get to my age, you can look back on the past and appreciate all the things you got to do when you were younger, without nursing any regrets. Because believe me, I have quite a few. One of them is I didn't go to Africa to see the crocodiles in the Zambezi. Believe it or not, I would have actually liked that. And another regret is actually not going to Alaska. I would have enjoyed a trip out there, I have to say.
But you could still go, couldn't you? You're not that old. You've still got a lot of energy in you.
I know, dear, but I enjoy being at home, relaxing in Florida. I don't want to be gallivanting around the globe. I think it would be far too exhausting for me.
Oh, well, I suppose I can understand that. I'm sorry if I look a little like champagne that has lost its fizz. It's not your fault, Mrs. Morley. I guess you've just opened my eyes. I always think I'm going to live forever, but your words of wisdom have made me realise that that is absolutely not true, because unfortunately life is unpredictable at the best of times. There's no guarantees for anyone, no matter how old they are.
Well said, my dear. Nothing is ever easy. Sometimes life can be an obstacle course of tumultuous challenges that we have to overcome and endure. But then again, I always say, if our paths are too easy, life might be a tad boring.
Point taken, I agreed. Although boring isn't always that bad. Sometimes boring can be quite comfortable, I think.
Well, let's just say, my dear, when I was your age, I used to think I was immortal. But now that I'm in my 80s, I'm very much aware of my own mortality, of how fragile and very short life is. It really is over in a jiffy, you know. It seems like only the other day I was your age. Over the years, I've lost many good friends, especially now that I'm at the age that I am, to both illness and tragedy. So I guess it's made me unduly cautious, which is probably not a good thing if I come to think of it. When I look at my grandson Curtis, for example, who, like you, has his whole life ahead of him, well, he's also adopted a similar attitude that I naively had as a young girl. And I certainly wish he'd shake it out of him, like the crumbs on an apron, because he seems to believe he's going to live forever too.
What exactly do you mean? I asked.
Mrs. Morley sighed. You name it, Curtis has taken risks that I don't approve of, without even batting an eyelid. He's swum with sharks, played with poisonous snakes, and if that's not bad enough, he's bungee jumped. And every time he does these insane things, my heart almost misses a beat. But that young man thinks he's going to live forever. And I wish he'd appreciate the fragility of life. We should never take anything for granted, you know. I just sincerely hope that I haven't upset you with all this talk. That's not my intention, I assure you, Alice dear.
You haven't upset me, Mrs. Morley. I really appreciate your salient advice, and I mean that. My father always taught me to listen to my elders, because they might help me to not make the mistakes they did in life. To tell you the truth, before speaking to you about my plans here in North America, I was genuinely thinking of going travelling alone, but you've really made me reevaluate everything. I think I may look for a travel companion after all, if I do take an intrepid trip to Alaska, or the Yellowstone National Park, that is. So there we are, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.